There are a lot of different types of record collectors in this hobby, and the longer you're around it, you start to notice tendencies, repetitive conversations. Goes without saying that there is plenty of stereotypical behavior to throw shade out. We'll give it a shot on this episode, talking about records. My name is G.I. Sanders from NTX Vinyl, a small chain of independent shops in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. If you're not local, but you are in the U.S., you can shop online at ntxvinyl.com and would love it if you'd subscribe to our channel here on YouTube. Follow us across social media on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Vinyl collector stereotypes. This should be interesting. In full disclosure, not my idea. In fact, I owe all credit to my children because they watch this YouTube channel called Dude Perfect, which if you have school-age children, certainly you've probably seen it or heard it. It's a massive show and a tour, and these guys do incredible videos, lots of humor involved. They're actually based here locally outside the Dallas area, but anyways, they do a stereotype series where they will do stereotypes on people who are vacationing at the beach, or stereotypes of people who travel on airplanes, right? And it's usually pretty damn hilarious. I don't think I'm going to be quite that funny, but it gave me the idea of, man, it would be pretty interesting to pick out the top stereotypes in the vinyl community. So that's what we're going to do here. Now, keep in mind, of all of these that I'm going to list, I'm as guilty as probably you are on some level, on the right day with the right record in the right scenario, fitting into all these buckets. So as much as I'm talking trash about you, it's right back on me as well in most cases. So the number one vinyl stereotype, the easiest one to spot, is the analog snob. This is my favorite one. It's running rampant these days. They're everywhere. You post a picture of a record, or you see someone post a picture of a record, and inherently an analog snob will chime in. Yes, but where was it sourced? Where was it cut? Where was it pressed? Who mastered it, right? All excellent questions, by the way, that you should be asking. But it's kind of gotten out of control. Like, I think we've lost sight of the point here in regards to the music that we're collecting and enjoying. And that's fine. Some people really like to get into the minutia and the details of a certain record, and they like to talk about it a lot. You know, again, I talk about records a lot, but the analog snob, man, get them going and they're never going to shut up, right? And again, that's fine. Like, if that's what you're into, I totally get it. Some people have spent many tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on their turntable and their stereo equipment, and so maybe that gives them the right to be an analog snob. More power to them. I'm sure it sounds unbelievable. I just don't have the ears for that, really. I've got a system that I think sounds good to my ears, and that's kind of all I need. But you know, like I said, the analog snob's pretty easy to spot because most of the time they're very vocal and they will call out a record if they know that it's not analog. That's a digitally sourced record. What is that? Just MP3s pressed to vinyl? Like, I'm so tired of reading this garbage. It's just taken over so many groups, communities, forums, whatever you want to call them, in a lot of ways. And honestly, it's just kind of overplayed at this point from my perspective. This is my personal opinion here. So I don't dislike the analog snob. I'm just kind of tired of hearing from him, right? But it's all good. It's an analog format, so comes with the territory. And like I said, a lot of times I'm in the same boat. I love a good analog record. I love the warmness of it. At the same time, I can totally appreciate all records, regardless of where they're sourced. If it sounds good to me and I enjoy it and I appreciate it, I'm good with that. So no offense to the analog snob, but you know, we're kind of tired of hearing from you, I think. Next on my list of vinyl collector stereotypes is Mr. or Mrs. OG. If you're not familiar with OG, it's a term that really means original gangster, but at some point in time, I have no idea when, an original pressing, or an OP, if you will, got renamed an OG. So, point being, if you've got an original or an early pressing, it's kind of now known as an OG. I don't really know who adopted that or how it got into the vinyl collecting hobby, but it's there. And you can easily spot Mr. or Mrs. OG as well, because if you post a reissue, if you take a photo, if you talk about a reissue, Mr. OG, they'll come and get you and they will call you out and say, "What is that?" It kind of goes right behind the analog snob, if you will, because a lot of times it will be like, "Oh, that's not an original. You should try to get an original. That reissue is garbage. It's not analog." All records are not created equal. I swear I say that in almost every video I do. But Mr. OG, he's a hard one to deal with. He only collects the originals. He doesn't want anything to do with a reissue, even if it does sound better. He refuses to admit it. He only wants that original copy. In fact, if it's not an original, it's pretty much worthless in his opinion. And to me, it's just very confusing. But again, they run rampant. They're out there, especially as the vinyl revival has happened over the last couple years, and there's been a lot of new collectors who have gotten into this and don't have experience collecting older vintage pre-owned original pressings versus new stuff, which you can buy at record stores or big box stores. And Mr. OG really likes to get in on those conversations and call out people for their reissues, especially if it's a color vinyl, and God forbid if it comes from Walmart, all these types of things. So yeah, Mr. OG's usually pretty grouchy and really opinionated, and just likes to get in there and muck up a conversation and troll along and just make sure everybody knows that he has the original and everything else is far inferior. My third vinyl collector stereotype is called the Crosley Basher. Now, keep in mind, I'm using Crosley as a kind of catch-all for lower end turntables, so I apologize to Crosley. I'm sure they make some perfectly fine turntables, but the lower end suitcase all-in-one type of players that you can buy for, $50 even, which is a pretty low price point for a turntable. But there's lots of people who start with these things. Look, and I think that's perfectly fine. I think anyone who's in it for the long haul will probably understand pretty quickly that the sound that's coming out of a suitcase player, a Crosley, if you will, is not really all that great. It's got tiny little speakers and it's all built in one, and the speakers are rumbling around and the record's spinning on top of it. So it's not the greatest experience. But who cares? Like, just keep scrolling. If you're not into the idea of using a suitcase type of player, does that mean that you have to then bash that new collector who is so excited that they just bought their first couple records and they got this new turntable, right? It happens all the time. There are some people who are helpful and who are trying to educate new collectors and saying, hey, just be careful. You don't want that to ruin your records. You want to make sure and, not play them too much on that type of player. You should look at upgrading at some point. That's totally fine. But I would say by and large, the Crosley Basher is pretty rude and pretty to the point and just says, your turntable sucks. What is that piece of garbage? I see it all the time. It's very discouraging to new collectors because, again, they're coming forward with some excitement because they just got their first turntable and they just got a few records. Maybe it was given to them as a gift even. They didn't even pick it out, but it doesn't matter. The Crosley Basher's coming after them. Going to make a point to make sure that it's known that that is not up to their standards. And, who are you to have your own turntable based on the money you have? Like, you should spend more money, right, and make sure and upgrade immediately, because that's going to ruin all of your records without a doubt. Give me a freaking break, right? Like, come on, just like I said, keep scrolling. Like, I get it. It's not the best gear. It's probably not the best for your records. It's certainly not the best for the sound and the experience of vinyl collecting, but everybody's got to start somewhere. The Crosley Basher, they don't like that at all. Number 4. Vinyl collector stereotype. This is the VC. Now, I've always known the term VC as venture capitalist, but in the vinyl community, which is another VC, there is a term which I didn't even know existed until recently, and that is a variant collector, also known as the VC. Now, the variant collector, um, by and large, they're not in it for the music, and I'm generalizing, of course. They're in it to collect variants. So they may have 100 records in their record collection, but they may actually only have 10 different albums because they've got 10 different variants of each one. They've got the red and blue splatter, and they've got the charcoal swirl, and they've got the clear with the the marbling in it. They've got all the different kinds, or maybe they have different covers, and again, guilty as charged. I've got some different variants in my collection, but by and large, the variant collector, at least as I see it, is not in it for the right reasons. They're really kind of in it just to collect them as artifacts, like their baseball cards or comic books or something. Because most of the variant collectors that I see, again, they're not even opening their variants. They just keep them all closed in shrink wrap and they put them on the shelf. I don't really know what they're waiting for. I guess, actually, I do. They're waiting for them to go up in value, I guess, because they're kind of seen more as collectibles as part of, as opposed to actual pieces of a format of music that you can experience and play, right? And again, I'm generalizing. I don't want to make anyone mad here, even though I know that's going to happen. But the variant collector is getting more and more prominent, and I think that is due to Record Store Day and indie exclusives and just record labels in general putting out lots of different variants of certain albums. And again, I think having one or two or three copies of a certain album, if they're different or unique from different years, like I don't really see that as a variant collector. I think a variant collector is like, oh, I've got 5 or 10 different copies of this album that just came out 2 years ago, and I've collected every one of them. And of the 8 copies I have, I've only opened one. I've got the other sealed for a rainy day. Like, I get it. It's a collectible thing. It's called a hobby for a reason. But the variant collector, I think, has taken that to a whole new level. Is it detrimental to the hobby long term? I really don't know. That remains to be seen because I don't think this was something that ever existed up until the last few years. At least I wasn't aware of it. But it's been very interesting to see how it's kind of evolved. And I see more and more newer collectors who now are kind of use this term of VC or variant collector to label themselves. And again, I don't know if that's good or bad. It's just something that stood out to me. And as I thought of stereotypes, the VC or the variant collector is one to keep an eye on, in my opinion. The last vinyl collector stereotype I will point out is the get off my lawn, all new music sucks collector. These guys are my favorite. They pop up every now and then, and I love it. There's even memes that point to the fact that, why music used to sound better on vinyl? Well, that's because it was the music themselves, and they just don't make it like that anymore. Oh, it's so frustrating to hear. There's so much great new music still being written and recorded and released, whether it's net new, whether it's going back into archives of older music that's being brought to life on vinyl. There is so much to discover, and I just really despise the sentiment that it's only good if it's old. Like I don't enjoy that. I think music is a timeless thing, and there are kids in their garages starting bands and learning how to play instruments and learning how to sing, learning how to coexist right now that will eventually write and record and release music, and that's a beautiful thing. So the get off my lawn collector is stuck in the past. They are not open-minded to anything other than what they grew up with, and that's typically pretty frustrating to see. It usually sparks a pretty good conversation. I'll give them that, but it's not exactly the type of collector that I like to associate or communicate with. Again, it's just closed-minded, and I think this has really crept up in the last couple of years as well as vinyl has come back. There is a sentiment from people who have been collecting for a long time that, oh, this is terrible for the hobby. It's making prices go up. I used to be able to go in and buy records at this much, and now I have to spend so much more because there's all these new people involved. Again, get off my lawn, right? The reality is that without new collectors, without new music, none of this will sustain, and it will just go away again like it did in the 90s and the 2000s as far as mainstream availability is concerned. And I don't want that. I don't think a lot of people want that, but the get off my lawn collector, I think, does. They just want to stay rooted in the past. They don't want to move the industry forward. They don't really care about the vinyl format as far as longevity. They just want to hoard their own records and stay in their box and listen to them. And hey, more power to them. If that's you, it's all good. I'll stay off your lawn, I promise. Last but not least, I'll give you one more bonus vinyl collector stereotype, and that is the know-it-all store owner. That's me, G.I. Sanders. Thanks for watching another episode of Talking About Records. We will see you again next time.